Hi, everyone. Welcome to the EMEA North Supply Chain Resilience Conference. My name is Tom Raftery, Global VP at SAP. Also, according to my business card, I am a futurist and innovation evangelist, and I am host of the Digital Supply Chain Podcast, a bi-weekly, well, let me clarify that, a podcast that goes out twice a week, Mondays and Fridays, on all things digitization of supply chain. This morning, I am emceeing this event, this conference, and also I'm leading off the opening keynote with my colleague, John McNiff, who I will invite to join me shortly. First, I just want to go through a quick presentation of my own. 2 seconds while I load up the slides. So, this device on the screen now is called a Plume personal airflow sensor. And it speaks to how the cost of sensors has fallen and fallen and fallen and fallen, and connectivity as well. Everything that is being made now is being made with smarts and connectivity built in. And this has huge implications. So this device has got 5 separate sensors in it for different aspects of air quality. It also has Bluetooth. It has a USB-C connection. It has a battery that lasts 24 hours, et cetera, et cetera. It connects to an app on your phone, which looks a bit like this. This is 3 different screens from, or 3 different times, screenshots of 3 different times of the app on this device. So the first one on the left, I took this back in February, 8 o'clock in the morning. This is the route on the top there is the route I take to walk my dogs. And obviously you've got a kind of traffic light color scheme for the quality of the air: red, bad; yellow, okay; green, good. And you can see 8 a.m., a lot of people going to work, taking their kids to school, that kind of thing. A lot of traffic, air quality, not great. In the middle, 8 p.m., the same day, same route, and you can see the color scheme has changed somewhat. Now the air quality is better on that large road in the middle because less people traveling on the road. And then the third one on the extreme right, I'll just move out of the way there, was 8 a.m. on a morning in May during the lockdown. And you can see green, 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 green. By the way, the numbers underneath where it says moderate and low there, you can see the all number on the left is an average of the next 5 numbers, and the next 5 numbers are the different air quality metrics. So there's PM1, PM2.5, PM10, NO2, and VOC. Those are the different things this device measures. Another sensor which is particularly useful is this particular one. It's called a Libre Freestyle sensor. It's on the back of my son's arm. He was diagnosed with diabetes type 1 a number of years ago. And this device, well, if you're type 1 diabetic, you need to several times a day, usually around 6 times a day, measure your blood sugar. And traditionally that was done by getting a kind of a little needle, pricking a spot on your finger, squeezing out some blood and applying it to a glucometer, a blood sugar reader. And now this device substitutes for that. It goes onto the back of your arm, it stays on for 2 weeks, and instead of 6 readings a day, you get 1,440, 1 every minute. So much richer data. It's got an inbuilt NFC chip, it's got an inbuilt Bluetooth chip, so it connects again to a phone. The NFC chip allows you to download to the phone, and then it uploads it to a personal private health cloud with this kind of analytics suite built into it, and access is given to your medical team, your family, that kind of thing. And you can see all different patterns. In this case, this is 2 weeks of data over a 24-hour average period. And you can see my son's blood sugar there as well within the kind of target 70 to 180 range, because we have access to that real-time data. And for context, when he was diagnosed, he was 453, so well off the chart. So now it's under much better control. But also, we're seeing increasingly sensors being built into everything, into watches now, and it's happening at a faster and faster and faster pace. You might not realize, but the Apple Watch was launched in 2015. It's only 5 years since the Apple Watch came out, and see the improvements that have happened in that time. It's unbelievable. And not just the Apple Watches, all kinds of smartwatches out there. Garmin produced them, Fitbit, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And increasingly, we are wearing more and more of these sensors on ourselves. And this, I think, is going to lead to the model that we're all in supply chain well aware of, the predictive maintenance model. I can see that model being copying and pasted into healthcare for people. They won't call it predictive maintenance for people, but it'll be a similar model. So that is, we're wearing sensors, they're monitoring our vital stats all the time. And as they go above or below particular thresholds, our trusted healthcare provider is alerted and calls us in for routine maintenance, not scheduled maintenance, but, predictive maintenance based on those thresholds. And many times that healthcare provider will have a diagnosis, 70 or 80% of the time before you even walk in the door. Other industries that are being upended by the rise of sensors and data and connectivity are things like manufacturing, and we're seeing huge changes there. We're seeing the shift to mass customization with lot sizes of one. This kind of thing really started off with big ticket items like automotive, but it has now gone down to things like sneakers. This is from the Nike Buy EU page, where you go to the Nike website and you completely customize the sneaker you want from Nike, and it is built completely to your order. So lot sizes of one are coming down to even sneakers and smaller devices yet again. Also in manufacturing, we're seeing a shift to 3D printing. Airbus, the airframe manufacturer, are using 3D printing now in their planes. The first commercial flight of a plane with a 3D printed component was in 2015, and it was an Airbus airframe. 3D printed parts for airframes use 90% less raw material and weigh 50%. And of course, weight for airframes, for planes, is a hugely significant factor. The lighter the plane is, the less fuel it uses. So a big sustainability win there. And then there's the shift to product as a service. And product as a service is a huge, huge, huge shift, which is happening in lots of different sectors. I mean, just think cloud computing. That's a shift to product as a service. Instead of buying servers, you're now consuming server cycles rather than buying the actual servers themselves. This particular one is the City of Los Angeles. City of Los Angeles doesn't own any streetlights. All the streetlights in Los Angeles are owned by Signify, the new name for what was Philips Lighting. And, again, it's a beautiful alignment of wants and needs. The City of Los Angeles wants their streetlights working all the time. Signify want revenue coming in from those streetlights all the time. They bill on a per lumen of light delivered basis. So they make sure that they're getting data back from those, where if any of them are about to fail, so they can swap them out for a new one. So they're always working when they're supposed to. So Los Angeles gets guaranteed light from the streetlights. Philips gets guaranteed income from the streetlights. So a great example there. The impacts here are happening in automotive as well. So we're seeing now cars, about 80% of all new cars manufactured are built with connectivity. They're bristling with sensors, obviously, but about 80% of them ship with a SIM card. And Continental, seeing this, and Continental make a lot of the smarts that go into our vehicles sold directly to the OEMs, Continental, seeing this, decided to do a predictive maintenance play for cars to be sold to fleet managers and service center managers. And while they were developing it, it was called the Remote Vehicle Data Platform. While they were developing it, they were approached by a weather company. And the weather company said to them, you're developing this platform for cars. You'll be collecting GPS, time of day, external air temperature, windscreen wiper status, fog light status, all these kinds of things. That would be massively valuable information to us as a weather company. They realized the cars were little mini weather stations broadcasting hyper-local real-time weather information. So Continental and this weather company have now gotten together to share the data. They're dotting I's, crossing T's on GDPR, et cetera, but it's a new thing for Continental. It hadn't occurred to them. So always be aware, if you are collecting data from sensors for things, there might be a left field use of that data that has not occurred to you. Connected cars, huge implications for the insurance business as well. You can now have, quite often, companies are offering pay as you drive. So you pay by the amount of kilometers you drive. I drive about 10,000 kilometers a year. My neighbor drives about 30,000, and we pay roughly the same insurance, which makes no sense. So pay as you drive. There's also the option of going increasingly for pay how you drive, where the amount of insurance you pay is based not just on the amount of kilometers you drive, but how you drive them. Your steering is assessed, your braking, your acceleration, your cornering, etc., all that kind of thing. And as I said, we're seeing the shift to product as a service, and this is impacting on the automotive industry as well. We're now seeing things like, this is the page, this is from the Spanish Volkswagen page. They're now doing a renting scheme for cars. Instead of selling the cars, they are renting them to customers. This gives them a direct relationship with the customer, which they haven't had before, because you get it directly from Volkswagen. The deal is with Volkswagen, delivered through their dealer network, but the business relationship is directly with Volkswagen. Volvo are doing similar, so not just Volkswagen doing this. And it speaks to a big change. It also allows them to get revenue from vehicles that they wouldn't, because these cars now are going electric. Electric vehicles give them less revenue over time because they don't break down as much, because they don't need as much maintenance and so on. So now they get revenue from renting them out over time. So big changes there. And the shift in supply chain that we've seen as a result of COVID now means that the supply chain organization is starting to allow companies to differentiate. When you have a decent, resilient supply chain now, it can be a competitive advantage. And this means supply chain managers are starting to get a seat at the table. Rather than being a cost center before, it can now be a strategic differentiator. And our final keynote from Knut Alike from McKinsey, partner at McKinsey, will talk more to this and the implications for communications for supply chain managers. And with that, I would like to invite my colleague, John McNiff, to the fore. Thank you for that. John, do you want to join us on stage?
Hey, hi, Tom. Good morning.
Good morning, John. How are you keeping?
Yeah, very well, thank you, very well.
Super. So, John, I mentioned there COVID and the impacts that's had on supply chains and supply chain organizations, and how it's coming, it's bringing supply chain organizations to the front. COVID obviously brought big disruption, but post-COVID, what are future supply chains going to look like?
Yeah, it's interesting, Tom. I mean, you talk a lot of, some would say futuristic, some would say now trends that are going on in business models, and that ultimately impact supply chains. And a lot of these examples are kind of in the discrete space, and where we're talking about, connected products, connected assets. And what's interesting, I've been spent a few years talking about these things. You get a lot more of the traditional industries. Maybe I'm in retail, I know there's a disruption coming from a slightly different angle. But if I'm in consumer products, or I'm in fast-moving consumer products or batch industries, they're kind of struggling a little bit with all this talk of disruption, new business models. But there are a few things which have been clear to everybody for years, and to most supply chain professionals. These topics are not new, and COVID is not suddenly the introduction of the word, resilience and dealing with disruption. We've been talking about it forever, whether it be trade wars, whether it be good old Brexit, whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. There is always impacts on supply chain that people need to adapt and respond to, and achieve some level of resilience. And then you've got the whole new business model angle, and what people are doing about it. I think what COVID has done is it's really shone a light on the need to adapt faster to the changes that we all know are coming, but there's a little bit of lethargy in how quick we need to respond. You can pick up any annual report for the last 5 to 10 years, and it always has 3 or 4 topics resonating through it. It's about understanding the customer experience. It's about getting more efficient and more agile in their supply chains from an end-to-end. It's typically talking about getting into e-commerce, direct to consumer, more personalization, lot size one. And last but not least, and I think we'll come on to again throughout the duration of the day, sustainability is a real differentiator and a business value now, as opposed to being just something we write on a CSR report. So people have been aware of it, and some of my favorite presentations, we always like to steal from our customers. And if you look at all the analysts, the McKinseys, the Gartners, they're listening to the customers and playing back a lot of these trends. And it is not new. And some of the smart companies, I've seen presentations from Bosch Siemens, from Procter & Gamble, and they use that phrase that the supply chain is a strategic advantage. The supply chain is a competitive advantage. It's a weapon. I need to get my goods to market sooner, because consumer choice is now also not just about which brand do I prefer, but if something's got functional fit, they want whatever can I get fastest. So if yours is not in stock, do I care if it's Electrolux or a Beko or a Bosch? People might get upset, but in general, a lot of the consumers don't. So the ability to fulfill those specialist needs in a timelier manner has been alive and kicking for a while. What COVID has done is, firstly, disruption is not something that just happened and gone away. So, when we get Fukushima or other weather events in the world where supply is disrupted, this is unfortunately is going on for a long time now. And so there's a bunch of things happening with that. One is it's really shone a light on the need to be agile, flexible, and resilient. Okay, that's important. But the second thing is now people are also looking at some of these other areas like new business models, variation in demand, different products. What do I take to market? Because actually a lot of the behaviors that are changing in people are probably going to be around for some time in the future. So, everyone's working virtually. We're here now in this fantastic forum. We're not sat in front of lots of people we can interact with. We're doing it over Zoom and Teams. This is the way it is. All of us, even parents, grandparents, have been using online shopping, e-commerce. Talking to an organization 2 weeks ago, they said their e-commerce channel had grown by 90% over the 3 months coming into that. And everyone is ordering things that come to my door. And that has so many different implications on, on the carbon footprint, because actually there could be a negative impact with people taking single objects being delivered to their door that we need to investigate. And more companies are being asked to look at how sustainable is their whole footprint of their products. So everything is changing, and I think the important thing is not that anything is new, but it's really brought into full focus behavioral changes, the need for some organizational change, and the acceleration of some of those trends. And maybe just one last comment, again, just reading in the Sunday Times at the weekend, this guy Max Pedro, who's left Walmart to become part of a technology e-commerce environment. And he said they have seen an acceleration of about 5 years of growth through the e-commerce and digital commerce channels over what was anticipated within the period of COVID. So again, completely disruptive, completely accelerating what we already knew. And what you can see is there are some companies that have dealt with it well in certain areas. I saw presentations from Velux. It's all about their ability to understand the demand and understand their ability to meet the supply based on the ever-changing state. I saw organizations like Pfizer talking more about organizational change, that they'd set up their organization to be much more collaborative and synchronized, and actually they put in place safeguards for when an event occurred so that they could respond from an organization. So lots of impact on things that we already knew, I think. And what I really see is COVID is a massive accelerator for this digitization of the supply chain. And it's really demonstrated that the supply chain is your make or break in this environment. And there's a lot of work to do, both organizationally, physically, where do I buy parts from, where do I source from, locally, across country, and so on and so on. That's going to be really need to look hard at going forward, as well as, fundamentally, what is it that we should be making into the future, and what is the demand? Will these crazy trends like toilet roll and sanitary products and hygiene products and so on, is that going to stick around forever? Bread makers, come on. Are these things that are staying with us, or is this just a passing fad? So it's really a fascinating time to be in the domain of supply chain, that's for sure.
It is. And I mean, you mentioned the e-commerce being catapulted forward about 5 years.
Yep.
Do you think the same thing is going to happen to technologies like cloud, like ecosystems and networks? Do you think they're going to be impacted as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what's clear is that the supply chain is a network business, firstly, and actually the signals that impact that network come from all different sources. They come from customers. They can come from the products themselves, and some of the examples you used, they're certainly coming from trading partners, from logistics partners. You know, the guy who delivers your product to the end consumer is not always the same company. So this ability to interact across the network it is clearly key to the supply chain's ability to respond in a timely fashion. Also, the connectivity of the data of the different sources, not just from network partners, but devices, customer insights across geographies and so on. Understanding that, and even within your own manufacturing environments and on, understanding that data and reusing that across different silos within the organization is also something which, again, people have tinkered with it, and there's lots of pilots out there, and people have an understanding, and we're talking about intelligent supply chains, we're talking about self-healing supply chains, but actually how many have really gone all in? It is very limited right now. So I think absolutely there is an acceleration from some of those technology items. And on top of that, in times of disruption, in times of fear, in times of restricted purse strings, clearly the way we deploy and what we deploy is also being impacted, and it's probably a big accelerator, and we're already seeing our own business from the cloud side of the house and less for the traditional long implementation cycles, and that is here to stay. That brings a level of standardization, but what it also does is it also creates a risk, because people are very quickly throwing up solutions to a problem in an isolated area without maybe understanding the full impact of the end-to-end supply chain. And the end-to-end supply chain and your ability to constantly adapt and be flexible, it links everything right from the original design, changes in bill of materials, new materials that may or may not be sustainable, may not be marketable, changes in the supply constraints, and the ability to both plan for this, but then execute and fulfill on that. You need to be not, again, thinking in these isolated silos, but much more tightly joining the domains together.
Sure. And of course, as we reimagine our new supply chains, that has huge implications as well for sustainability. As you say, as you more tightly join things together, you should make them more efficient, and more efficient, obviously, you're designing waste out of the system. And, I'm sure Stephen Jameson, when he talks later on this morning, we'll talk a bit about that. I heard a great quote recently that it's only waste if you waste it. So, that speaks to the requirement of us to design products that are at end of life, reusable, or recyclable, or a combination of both, that they should be easy to take apart and disassemble. So design them with disassembly in mind, design them with reuse in mind, design them with recycling in mind, and choose your materials accordingly. And of course, the importance of sustainability is becoming more apparent to everyone. I think we live on a planet of finite resources, and we are starting to use them at a pace that is not sustainable, hence the requirement for sustainability.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think going back to February, before this whole thing kicked off and the news changed, it was clear that the desired outcomes and the impact on customer demand is very heavily influenced by the sustainability ratio of those products. Are they recyclable? Are they using single-use plastics? Are they components and materials that are safe for the environment? How many trees are we chopping down? What's the carbon footprint across your business? People are starting to think about that. And SAP, and again, Stephen will talk about it later, I'm sure, but before COVID, BC, we talked about introducing a new currency into our domain. And in the ERP, it's often been thought of as, you know, at least the backbone is that it is a financial system, and everything we do can be rolled back to understand the finance and the profitability KPIs of what we're doing. If you add to that this new dimension, you know, and from a supply chain perspective, we were all about efficiency, you know, all for years, efficiency, reducing, taking that next 1% out. Then with these new business models we talked about, we start to look not just bottom line, but also top line. Can we achieve extra revenue through offering new services, or can we beat our competition by using our supply chain as a strategic weapon? This third dimension, this green line, becomes super important. So in the ERP, in S4 now, we're actually starting to embed the new currency of green, if you like, within S4. And then if you take that and extend that all across the elements of the supply chain, which is why we go right back into the design area at SAP supply chain. You know, you start to think about, as you say, am I making products that are sustainable? And it's not just about completely re-engineering a new aircraft or a new vehicle. In many cases, in space, design is changing one component, or it's changing the packaging, or it's putting a new label on the packaging, or it's taking a bottle out and doing something else. And actually, the understanding the impact of that, both in terms of the profitability, the marketability, where can you sell it, but also, you know, its footprint. So how heavy is it? How many can I get on a pallet, on a truck, and so on? All of that starts to come into both the design area. Then when you get into planning, you know, if I can understand this currency and my KPIs against my carbon footprint, or the need to report from a regulatory perspective, I can actually start to introduce that into my value stream planning in the planning world. And then, you know, downstream, understanding energy consumption, water consumption in manufacturing, energy consumption, and CO2 footprint in the logistics. You know, how full are my trucks, how many am I running, how far am I using them? If I buy components from China, it might be cheaper. Maybe I can get them on the same time, but is it going to actually give a bigger burden to the CO2 footprint? So all of these decisions become the new dimension, and we're working very hard at embedding that across the whole footprint of the extended supply chain, from design, plan, manufacture, deliver, and ultimately operations in the final state. And yeah, let's hope that you know, a lot of this will be driven by regulation, and it's clear that it's coming, especially in Europe. But increasingly, I think, you know, there's a desired outcome here from the consumer, that finally we're recognizing that this is just not just talk. I mean, my generation, we came from a very throwaway society, and it's taken a while. But now here we are, and understanding that the supply chain is integral through all elements, and not least, again, tracking and tracing where did that material go and how does it get back into the supply chain. This is something which is fundamental to the traceability aspects for us. So again, big opportunity for improvement. And as McKinsey will tell you later, 90% of manufacturing companies carbon typically coming in the supply chain. So it's a big area of opportunity.
Yeah, and I mean that's one of the fundamentals behind the SAP Climate 21 project, is to help, as you know, as you referred to, is to help organizations discover their carbon footprint of all the processes that they go through. And of course, in SAP, you know, we have a carbon footprint. It's not huge because, you know, we're a software company, but we do the processes for lots of the largest emissions companies in the world. Lots of the world's biggest emitters use our software. So if we can help them reduce their carbon footprint by, you know, 1% or 5% or 10%, it has orders of magnitude greater impact than our reducing our carbon footprint, which we are doing as well, obviously. You can see that in our annual reports. So it's hugely, hugely, hugely important. But I think at this point, it's time to move on and have Timon de Jong come on. Timon is going to talk about the human perspective of all this, because, you know, as is often said, changing technology is, you know, quite straightforward, relatively speaking. Changing people, not so easy. So I'll call on Timon now to come to the stage and tell us about the human perspective. Timon?
Yeah, thanks, Tom.
Thanks, John.